Captain Jake Morrison stared at the star map floating above his command chair. 300 years had passed since the Galactic Council threw humanity out of civilized space. 300 years of living like outcasts in the cold darkness between the stars. He ran his fingers through his graying hair and sighed. The bridge of the Resolute was quiet except for the soft hum of engines. His crew worked at their stations with practiced ease. Lisa Carter, his navigator, plotted their course to New Haven Station. Her blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her blue eyes focused on the glowing screen before her. "How long until we reach the station?" Jake asked. 6 hours, Captain, Lisa replied without looking up. "The supply run should be?" "Routine." Bobby Hudson looked up from his engineering console. The young man had joined the crew only 2 years ago, but he already knew the ship better than anyone. "Captain, the reactor is running smooth. We should have no problems." Karen White sat at the communications desk, monitoring radio frequencies from across the sector. Her dark skin gleamed under the bridge lights as she adjusted her headset. "All channels are clear, sir." "No council ships in the area?" Jake nodded. The council still considered this part of space off-limits to humans. They had made that very clear 3 centuries ago when they banished his people from their worlds and their protection. The memory still burned in every human heart. It had started with the mining colonies. Human settlers on Kepler-7 had discovered rich deposits of rare metals. The Zephyrian Empire, one of the Council's most powerful members, demanded that humans hand over all mining rights. When the colonists refused, the Zephyrians complained to the Council. The Council sided with the Zephyrians. They said humans were too aggressive and violent for civilized space. They called humans unpredictable and dangerous. In a vote of 8-1, with only the Kandorians supporting humanity, the Council ordered all human worlds to be abandoned. "Leave our space and never return," Chancellor Mordak had declared from his golden throne. "Your kind brings only chaos and war," Jake remembered watching the broadcast as a young boy. His father had served in the human fleet then, and Jake saw tears in the old man's eyes. Millions of humans packed their belongings and headed for the edge of known space. They left behind homes, friends, and the dream of being part of something bigger than themselves. Now humans lived in scattered colonies beyond the neutral zone. They traded with smugglers and pirates. They built their ships from scrap metal and spare parts. They survived, but they did not thrive. The alarm on Karen's console started beeping. She pressed her earpiece closer and frowned. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal." "What kind of signal?" Jake asked, standing up from his chair. "It's a council merchant ship," Karen said. "The Golden Wing. They're under attack by raiders about 2 hours from here." Lisa turned around in her seat. "That's deep in council space." "Captain, we're not supposed to be there." Bobby shook his head. "If the council catches us, they'll destroy our ship and ask questions later." Jake looked at his crew. These people trusted him with their lives. He had kept them safe for 5 years of trading runs and cargo hauling. But now he faced a choice that could change everything. "How many people are on that merchant ship?" he asked. Karen listened to the signal again. "The message says 200 civilians, sir. Families with children." Jake closed his eyes. The council had thrown humanity away like garbage. They had called humans violent and dangerous. They had refused to help when human colonies were attacked by pirates. But here was a council ship full of innocent people who needed help. "Set course for the Golden Wing," Jake said quietly. "Captain, are you sure?" Lisa asked. "This could mean war." "People are dying," Jake replied. "We don't abandon innocent people, even if their government abandoned us." The Resolute changed course and jumped into hyperspace. Within an hour, they emerged near the battle. The Golden Wing was a large passenger vessel with weak weapons. 3 pirate ships circled it like wolves around wounded prey. Green laser fire lit up the darkness as the pirates tried to destroy the merchant ship's engines. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "Bobby, give me everything the engines have." "Lisa, plot an attack run on the lead pirate ship." "Karen, try to contact the Golden Wing and tell them help is coming." The Resolute might have been built from spare parts, but it was fast and deadly. Human engineers had learned to build ships that could outfight anything in space. They had to, since they faced the universe alone. Jake's ship swooped down on the first pirate vessel. The Resolute's guns fired blue plasma bolts that cut through the enemy's shields like paper. The pirate ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The other two pirates turned to face this new threat. They had expected an easy target, not a warship. Their lasers bounced off the Resolute's shields while Jake's crew returned fire with deadly accuracy. Within 10 minutes, all three pirate ships were destroyed. The Golden Wing sent a message of thanks, but Jake could hear fear in the captain's voice. A human ship had just saved them, and that was against everything the Council taught. 2 days later, Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Collective arrived at New Haven Station. His ship was sleek and white, designed to show the power and wealth of the Council. He demanded to speak with whoever commanded the human vessel that had entered Council space. Jake met the ambassador in the station's main docking bay. Veltar was tall and thin, with purple skin and 4 arms. His eyes glowed yellow in his angular face. "You violated the Exiled Treaty," Veltar said in his mechanical voice. "Humans are forbidden from entering Council space." "People were dying," Jake replied. "We helped them." "That is not your concern," the ambassador snapped. "The Council will deal with pirates in our own way." Jake stepped closer to the alien. "Your way was to let 200 innocents die while your fleet was somewhere else." Veltar's eyes flashed with anger. "You forget your place, human. Your kind was exiled for good reason. You are violent and unpredictable." "Maybe we are," Jake said, with a smile. "But we don't let children die when we can save them." The ambassador left without another word, but Jake knew this was not over. The Council would not ignore what had happened. Humanity had broken their exile, and there would be consequences, but as Jake watched the alien ship disappear into hyperspace, he felt something he had not felt in years: pride. Humans might be exiled and alone, but they had not lost their souls. They still knew right from wrong, even when no one else cared. Admiral Alex Kane stood on the bridge of the Independence, watching the stars through the great window. The Kepler Nebula stretched out before him like a glowing cloud of purple and gold. Hidden inside this cosmic maze was humanity's greatest secret. For 50 years, the human fleet had been growing in the shadows. Kane was 60 years old, but his body was still strong from years of military training. His gray eyes had seen too much war and too much loss. He wore the blue uniform of the Free Human Navy, a force that the Council did not even know existed. "Admiral, the morning reports are ready," said Commander Lucy Grant, his second in command. She was a woman in her 30s with short red hair and a sharp mind for strategy. Lucy had been born in the hidden colonies, part of the first generation. To grow up in exile, Kane took the datapad from her hands. 27 ships were docked at the secret base inside the nebula. 50 more were scattered across the outer sectors, watching for Council patrols. The numbers were small compared to the Council's 1,000-ship fleet, but Kane knew that numbers were not everything. "Any word from the research division?" Kane asked. "Dr. Helen Ross wants to see you in Lab 7, Lucy replied. "She says it's urgent." Kane nodded and left the bridge. The Independence was more than a warship. It was a floating city where 10,000 humans lived and worked. Children played in the corridors while their parents built weapons and planned for war. This was humanity's future, hidden from the eyes of their enemies. Lab 7 was deep inside the ship. Behind glass doors and security checks, Dr. Helen Ross waited for him inside. Her white coat stained with grease and her brown hair tied back with a rubber band. She was 35 years old and the smartest person Kane had ever met. "Admiral, we've done it," Helen said, her voice shaking with excitement. "The quantum tunnel drive is working." Kane looked at the machine in the center of the lab. It was the size of a car, covered in wires and glowing crystals. "Show me," he said. Helen pressed a button on her control panel. The machine hummed to life, and a small metal ball appeared on the other side of the room. It had traveled through space without moving through the space between. Our ships can now jump anywhere in the galaxy without using hyperspace, Helen explained. The Council's sensors can't track us. We can appear and disappear like ghosts. Kane smiled for the first time in weeks. How long before we can install this on our ships? 6 months for the first 10 vessels, Helen replied. A year for the whole fleet. The Admiral left the lab and walked to the training deck. Colonel Pete Barnes was there, working with a group of young soldiers. Pete was a big man with dark skin and muscles like steel cables. He had been a Marine before the exile, and now he trained humanity's best fighters. "Admiral on deck!" Pete shouted, and the soldiers stood at attention. "At ease," Kane said. "How are the new recruits?" Pete grinned. "They're angry, sir. Good and angry. Every one of them lost family to Council policies. They want to fight." Kane watched the soldiers practice with their weapons. These were not the weapons of 300 years ago. Human engineers had built plasma rifles that could cut through any armor. They had created battle suits that made one soldier as strong as 10. They had learned to fight smart instead of fighting fair. "The Council thinks we're weak," Pete said. "They think exile broke us. They're going to learn different." Kane's communication device beeped. The message was from Captain Nathan Wood, commander of the scout ship Ranger. Nathan was exploring the outer sectors, looking for Council activity. "Admiral, we have a problem," Nathan's voice came through the speaker. "Council ships are moving toward the neutral zone. Looks like a full scout fleet." Kane frowned. The Council had not sent large forces to the border in decades. "How many ships?" 12 vessels, sir." "Altarian design? They're moving slow, like they're looking for something." Kane knew what they were looking for. News of Jake. Morrison's rescue had reached the Council leadership. They wanted to know how many humans were really out there and how strong they had become. "Nathan, shadow them, but don't engage," Kane ordered. "Report their every move." The Admiral walked to his private office and activated the secure communication system. President Susan Walsh appeared on the screen, calling from Earth's hidden location. Susan was 50 years old with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Alex, we have a problem," Susan said. "Council spies are asking questions on the trade stations. They want to know about human ship movements." Kane sat down at his desk. "The rescue at Golden Wing has made them nervous. They're finally realizing we didn't just disappear." "The Colonial Assembly is meeting tomorrow," Susan continued. "We need to decide what to do if they find our colonies." "What do you think?" Kane asked. Susan was quiet for a moment. "I think our hiding days are over. The question is whether we reveal ourselves or wait for them to find us." Kane looked out his window at the nebula. Somewhere out there, Council ships were hunting for his people. They would find some of the smaller colonies eventually. When they did, humanity would face a choice: run deeper into the darkness or stand and fight. "There's something else," Susan said. "We've been getting messages from other species. The Condorians want to meet. Some of the vegan colonies are asking for help against Council tax collectors." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Other species want to work with us?" "The Council has made a lot of enemies over the centuries," Susan replied. "They rule through fear and greed. Some species are tired of it." Kane thought about this news. Humanity had been alone for 300 years. The idea of having allies seemed impossible. But maybe exile had taught them something the Council had forgotten. Maybe they had learned to value freedom above comfort. "Ma'am, I recommend we prepare for contact," Kane said. "If the Council wants to find us, let's make sure we're ready for them." "Agreed," Susan replied. "But Alex, remember what we've learned. We're not the same humans who were exiled. We're stronger, smarter, and we've got nothing left to lose." Kane nodded. The boy who had watched his people driven from their homes was gone. In his place stood a man who would not let it happen again. The next morning, Kane stood before his officers in the main briefing room. Captains and commanders filled the seats, men and women who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. "The Council is moving," Kane announced. "They know we're out here, and they're coming to find us. The question is not whether we'll fight. But when and where? The room was silent. These people had been born in exile or had grown up in hiding. They had never known the comfort of belonging to something bigger than themselves. But they had learned something the Council had forgotten. They had learned that freedom was worth any price. "We've spent 3 centuries building our strength," Kane continued. "Now we're going to find out if it was enough." Captain Sarah Mills raised her hand. She commanded the destroyer Defiant and had fought pirates for 10 years. "Admiral, what? About the civilians, the families in the colonies?" Kane looked at each face in the room. "We protect them. That's what we've always done. That's what makes us human." The meeting ended and the officers returned to their ships. Within hours, the human fleet was moving through the nebula, preparing for whatever came next. The shadows were lifting and humanity was ready to step into the light. Commander Ryan Bell watched the enemy ships approach on his main screen. 12 Council vessels moved in perfect formation toward Research Station Alpha, humanity's most important science facility. The station hung in space like a metal flower, its labs full of the technology that would decide humanity's future. Ryan commanded the destroyer Valiant, one of the newest ships in the human fleet. He was 32 years old with black hair and steady hands that never shook in battle. His crew of 80 people trusted him completely, and he would not let them down. "Enemy ships entering weapons range," reported Lieutenant Tom Garcia from the tactical station. Tom was young but smart, and he knew the Valiant's weapons better than anyone. "All stations report ready," said Chief Engineer Amy Lopez over the ship's speakers. Amy worked miracles with the ship's engines, keeping them running when lesser engineers would have given up. Ryan stood up from his command chair. The Council ships were bigger than his destroyer, but size did not win battles. Speed and smart. Thinking won battles, and humans had learned to be very smart. "Fire control, target the lead ship," Ryan ordered. "All weapons, prepare to engage." The Council fleet opened fire first. Red laser beams cut through space toward the research station. Their plan was simple: destroy the station and everything in it. Then report back to their leaders that the human threat was ended, but the Valiant moved between the enemy and the station like a shield. Ryan's ship twisted and turned through the laser fire, its advanced engines making it impossible to hit. The Council ships were built for fighting in large formations, not for chasing fast targets. "Return fire," Ryan commanded the Valiant's plasma. Cannons lit up the darkness. Blue energy bolts slammed into the lead Council ship, punching through its shields like they were made of paper. The enemy vessel exploded in a burst of fire and metal pieces. The other Council ships broke formation, confused by the loss of their leader. They had expected to find a small research station with weak defenses. Instead, they faced a human warship that fought like nothing they had ever seen. "Tommy, can you jam their communications?" Ryan asked. "Already on it, sir," Tom replied, his fingers dancing over his control panel. "They can't talk to each other anymore." This was humanity's secret weapon. Council fleets depended on constant communication to work together. When that communication was cut, their ships became confused and easy targets. The Council had grown soft during 3 centuries of ruling the galaxy. They had forgotten how to fight real wars. Tracy Ford sat at her computer station deep inside the Valiant's hull. She was 25 years old with bright blue eyes and fingers that moved faster than lightning across her keyboard. Tracy was humanity's best cyber warfare specialist, and she was about to change the course of the battle. "I'm inside their computer systems," Tracy announced. "These Council ships are using old security codes. I can control their weapons and engines," Ryan smiled. "Do it." Within seconds, 2 Council ships turned their guns on their own allies. The enemy fleet fell apart as ships fired on each other and tried to escape. Some vessels fled toward hyperspace while others spun out of control, their engines shut down by Tracy's computer virus. In 10 minutes, the battle was over. 7 Council ships were destroyed, and the rest had run away. Research Station Alpha was safe, and humanity had won its first major victory against the Council in 300 years. But Ryan knew this was just the beginning. The surviving Council ships would report back to their leaders. Soon everyone In the galaxy would know that humanity was no longer hiding in the shadows. News of the victory spread quickly through human space. On the hidden colony world of New Boston, people danced in the streets when they heard the report. Children who had grown up hearing stories about the exile now had a new story to tell, the story of humanity fighting back. President Susan Walsh received the battle report in her office on Earth. She was meeting with representatives from 30 human colonies, men and women who had traveled across the galaxy to discuss their future. "The Council will not ignore this," said Governor Bill Turner from the mining world of Kepler 12. Bill was an old man who remembered the early days of exile, when humans barely had enough food to survive. "Good," replied Colonel Janet Stone, who commanded the defense forces on New Terra. Janet was 40 years old with gray eyes, like steel, and a voice that never showed fear. "Let them come. We're ready for them." Susan looked at the faces around the table. These people had built new lives in the darkness between stars. They had raised children who had never seen the homeworld. They had created a society based on freedom and hard work, not the fear and control that the Council used. "We have a choice to make," Susan said. "We can go back into hiding and hope the Council forgets about us, or we can stand up and fight for what we believe in." The vote was unanimous. 30 colonies chose to fight, but humanity was not the only species making difficult choices. On the distant world of Candor Prime, rebel leader Zaxel received secret messages from human agents. The Condorians had always been treated badly by the Council, forced to pay heavy taxes while receiving no protection. Zaxel was tall and thin with blue skin and large black eyes. His people were natural fighters, but the Council kept them weak by controlling their weapons and technology. The message from humanity offered something the Condorians had never had before: hope. "The humans are fighting the Council," Zaxel told his followers at a secret meeting. "They offer to share their weapons and knowledge with any species that joins them." The Condorian rebellion began 3 days later. Zaxel's fighters attacked Council tax collection centers and freed political prisoners from Council jails. For the first time in centuries, the Condorians fought back against their oppressors. Similar rebellions started on other worlds. The vegan colonies refused to ship food to Council worlds. The Centauri mining stations went on strike. The Proxima trade routes shut down. Species that had been quiet for hundreds of years suddenly found their voices. The Council leadership met in emergency session on their capital world of Prima. Chancellor Mordek sat on his golden throne, surrounded by advisors and military commanders. The reports coming in from across the galaxy were all bad news. "The humans are building alliances," reported General Kethfer, the Council's top military officer. "They're turning our own member species against us." "How is this possible?" Mordek demanded. "We exiled them centuries ago. They should be weak and scattered." "They're not weak, Chancellor," replied Intelligence Chief Nexum. "Our spies report that human technology is more advanced than ours. Their ships are faster, their weapons are stronger, and their computer systems are impossible to hack." Mordek's 4 eyes glowed with anger. The humans were supposed to be defeated, broken, and forgotten. Instead, they had become stronger during their exile. They had learned to survive without the Council's help, and now they were teaching other species to do the same. "Prepare the Grand Fleet," Mordek ordered. "We will crush this human rebellion before it spreads further." But Admiral Alex Kane was already moving his own forces. The Independents led a fleet of human ships toward the edge of Council space. Kane knew that the real war was about to begin. The skirmish at Research Station Alpha had been just a test of strength. Kane stood on his bridge, watching the stars grow brighter as his fleet moved toward their destiny. Beside him, Commander Lucy Grant studied the latest intelligence reports. "The Condorians have taken 6 star systems," Lucy reported. "The vegans have cut off food supplies to 12 Council worlds. The rebellion is spreading faster than we expected." Kane nodded. "The Council ruled through fear for too long. Once people stop being afraid, the game changes." "What's our next target, sir?" Lucy asked. Kane pointed to a star on the navigation screen. "Kepler 442b. The Council has slave labor camps there with over 2 million prisoners. It's time to set them free. The Independence and her escort ships jumped into hyperspace, carrying humanity toward its greatest challenge. The Council had exiled them long ago, thinking that would end the problem. Instead, exile had made humanity stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. The storm was rising, and nothing would ever be the same again. General Danny Clark crouched behind a metal barrier as laser fire lit up the sky above him. The battle for Kepler 442b had been raging for 6 hours, and his human forces were winning. Around him, soldiers from a dozen different species fought, side by side against the Council guards. Danny was 45 years old, with gray hair and scars on his face from 20 years of fighting. He had learned warfare in the outer colonies, where pirates and slavers were constant threats. Now he led the largest liberation force in galactic history. "General, the West Camp is secure," reported Captain Joe Parker over the radio. Joe commanded a mixed unit of humans and freed Kandorian prisoners who had joined the fight. "We've got 800 people heading to the evacuation ships." "Copy that," Danny replied. "How many guards are left?" "Maybe 50, sir. They're holed up in the main prison building, but they won't last long." Danny looked across the battlefield. The slave camps on Kepler 442b covered an entire continent. For 200 years, the Council had brought prisoners here from across the galaxy. Political rebels, criminals, and anyone who spoke against Council rule ended up in these camps. The Liberation had started at dawn when human ships appeared in orbit. The Council guards had been caught completely by surprise. They expected to face unarmed prisoners, not trained soldiers with advanced weapons. "Sir, we've got a problem," said Sergeant Maria Santos, Danny's radio operator. Maria was a tough woman from New Boston who could fight as well as any man. "Council reinforcements are coming. 3 ships, maybe 4. Danny smiled. "Tell Admiral Kane we're ready for them." High above the planet, the Independence waited with 5 other human warships. Admiral Kane watched the Council ships approach on his main screen. They were older vessels, designed for fighting pirates and rebels, not for real military combat. "Admiral, the Council ships are hailing us," reported Communications Officer Tim Brooks. Tim was young but steady under pressure, and he kept the fleet connected during battle. "Put them through," Kane ordered. The face of Council Captain Vexstar appeared on the screen. The alien had green skin and yellow eyes that burned with anger. "Human vessels, you are in violation of galactic law. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Kane stepped forward. "This is Admiral Kane of the Free Human Navy. We're here to liberate innocent people from illegal prison camps. Stand down and you won't be harmed." Vexstar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "You think your handful of ships can defeat the Council? We have ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. "Your time is over," Kane replied calmly. "Last chance to surrender." The Council ships opened fire, red lasers cutting through space toward the human fleet. But Kane's ships were ready. They scattered like leaves in the wind, their quantum tunnel drives making them impossible to track. The battle was over in 15 minutes. 2 Council ships were destroyed and 1 was captured. The 4th ship escaped to hyperspace, its crew running home to report another human victory. On the planet's surface, the liberation continued. General Clark's forces had freed over 500,000 prisoners in the first day. The freed slaves came from 30 different species, all united by their hatred of the Council. One of the freed prisoners was Exiled, a Kandorian scientist who had been imprisoned for refusing to build weapons for the Council. He was old and weak, but his eyes still burned with intelligence. "Why do you help us?" Exiled asked Danny as medics treated his wounds. "We are not your people." Danny knelt beside the alien. "Anyone who fights for freedom is our people. The Council forgot that, but we never did." While the liberation of Kepler 442b continued, Captain Linda Hayes piloted her stealth ship Phantom through the heart of Council space. Linda was 38 years old with red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. Her ship was invisible to Council sensors, allowing her to gather intelligence deep behind enemy lines. The Phantom drifted near the Council capital world of Prima. its cameras recording everything. Linda watched as hundreds of ships moved through the system, carrying soldiers and supplies. The Council was preparing for war, but they were also showing signs of panic. "Computer, start recording," Linda said quietly. "Intelligence Report 77 Alpha. The Council is moving food supplies away from rebellious worlds. They're trying to starve their own people into submission." Linda's cameras captured images of prison ships carrying thousands of political prisoners. She recorded conversations between Council leaders, planning to destroy entire colonies that had joined the Human Alliance. The evidence was damning. "They're not just fighting a war," Linda whispered to herself. "They're committing genocide." The Phantom slipped away from Prima and jumped to hyperspace. Within hours, Linda's intelligence reports were being transmitted across the galaxy. Human radio stations broadcast the evidence of Council crimes, and the recordings spread from world to world. The effect was immediate. 5 more star systems declared independence from the Council. The Altarian colonies refused to send tribute to their homeworld. Even some Council member species began to question their government's actions on Earth. President Susan Walsh met with Council representatives who had requested peace talks. The meeting took place on neutral ground, a space station in the demilitarized zone. Walsh brought proof of Council war crimes, while the Council delegation tried to negotiate. "The humans have violated the Exiled Treaty," said Ambassador Veltar. The same alien who had confronted Jake Morrison months earlier. "They must return to their assigned space immediately." Susan placed a data pad on the table between them. "This contains evidence of slave labor camps, political murders, and genocide. The Exile Treaty is void because the Council broke galactic law first." The Council representatives studied the evidence with growing alarm. They had not expected the humans to be so well informed about Council activities. "What do you want?" asked Ambassador Nexum, a thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms. "Complete freedom for all species," Susan replied. "No more slave camps, no more forced tribute, no more political prisoners. Every world gets to choose its own government." "Impossible," Veltar said. "The Council maintains order in the galaxy. Without us, there would be chaos." Susan smiled. "There's already chaos. The difference is that now people are fighting for something better." The peace talks failed, as everyone expected. The Council could not accept a galaxy where they did not rule, and humanity would not accept anything less than total freedom. The final battle began 3 days later at the Nexus, a strategic star system that controlled the main hyperspace routes. Admiral Kane brought the entire human fleet, 60 ships strong. The Council responded with their Grand Fleet, over 300 vessels commanded by their best admirals. Kane stood on the bridge of the Independence, watching enemy ships fill the space around them. His officers were calm, but tense, knowing that this battle would decide the fate of every free species in the galaxy. "Admiral, we're outnumbered 5-1, reported Commander Lucy Grant. "Are you sure about this?" Kane looked at the tactical display. The Council ships were arranged in the classic formation they had used for centuries, designed to overwhelm enemies with superior numbers, but numbers were not everything. "Lucy, remember what General Clark told us after the Liberation," Kane said. "It's not about how many ships you have. It's about how many people believe in what you're fighting for." Kane opened the communication channel to every ship in his fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that dreams of freedom. The Council thinks they can crush us with numbers, but they're wrong. We have something they lost long ago, the will to sacrifice everything for what's right." The human fleet moved forward, their ships spreading out in a pattern the Council had never seen before. Instead of fighting as one large formation, each ship operated independently, using its speed and advanced technology to strike at enemy weak points. The Battle of the Nexus lasted 8 hours. When it was over, the Council Grand Fleet was scattered and broken. Some ships had been destroyed, others had surrendered, and many had simply fled. The humans had lost only 7 vessels. While the Council had lost over 200, Admiral Kane stood among the wreckage of the enemy fleet, knowing that the war was won. The Council's military power was broken, and their member species were abandoning them by the dozens. The exile was over, and humanity had not just survived. They had triumphed, but Kane knew that winning the war was only the beginning. Now came the harder task of building a galaxy where all species could live in freedom and peace. President Susan Walsh stood at the window of her office on New Terra, watching children play in the gardens below. Human children laughed alongside young Kandorians, vegans, and even some Altarians. Their parents had once been enemies, but the children saw only friends. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Nexus. The Council's government had collapsed, and their member worlds were joining the new Free Worlds Alliance as fast as Susan could process the applications. What had started as humanity's fight for survival had become something much larger. "Ma'am, the Proximan delegation is here," announced her secretary, Captain Julie Chun. Julie had served in the human fleet during the war and now helped run the new government. She was young but wise, with black hair and kind eyes. Susan nodded. "Send them in." 3 Proximan representatives entered her office. They were tall aliens with silver skin and large blue eyes. Their leader, Ambassador Colin, had traveled from the other side of the galaxy to meet with the human president. "President Walsh, my people wish to join your alliance," Colin said in his musical voice. "The Council forced us to give them half our food production for 300 years. Now we want to trade freely with all species," Susan smiled. "The Alliance welcomes any species that believes in freedom and peace. But remember, we're not building another empire. Every member world governs itself." "That is why we came," Colin replied. "The Council ruled through fear. You offer something we have never had, the right to choose our own path." After the Proximans left, Susan walked to the central plaza of New Terra's capital city. The plaza was full of beings from dozens of different worlds. Vendors sold food from their home planets while children played games that mixed traditions from across the galaxy. Admiral Jake Morrison approached her from across the plaza. The former cargo ship captain now commanded the Alliance Defense Force, protecting member worlds from pirates and other threats. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes still held the same determination that had led him to rescue the Golden Wing. "Susan, we have a problem," Jake said quietly. "Some of the former Council worlds want us to govern them. They don't know how to rule themselves." Susan frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Zephyrian colonies are asking us to send administrators," Jake explained. "They say they need human guidance to build democratic governments." Susan shook her head. "That's exactly what we fought against. If we start ruling other species, we become just another council." "I agree," Jake said. "But these people need help. They've been slaves for so long that they don't remember how to be free." Susan thought about this problem as they walked through the plaza. The Alliance had grown to include over 200 star systems in just 6 months. Many of these worlds had never known democracy or freedom. They expected their new human allies to tell them what to do. "We'll send advisors, not rulers," Susan decided. "People who can teach them how to build their own governments. But every world has to find its own way." That evening, Susan met with the Alliance Council in the Great Assembly Hall. Representatives from 50 species sat in a circle, each voice equal regardless of how big or small their homeworld was. This was the new way of governing, through cooperation instead of force. Admiral Alex Kane gave his military report first. The old warrior looked tired but satisfied. His fleet had fought the last battle of the war 3 weeks ago, defeating the remnants of Council forces near the Vega system. "The former Council military is completely disbanded," Kane reported. "Most of their ships have been converted to cargo vessels or scrapped. The few remaining Council loyalists have fled to the Outer Rim." General Danny Clark stood up next. The Liberation hero now commanded Alliance ground forces, but his main job was protecting refugees and former prisoners. "We've resettled over 10 million freed slaves," Danny said. "Most are returning to their homeworlds, but some want to stay in Alliance space. Double quotes. Dr. Helen Ross presented the science report. Her quantum tunnel technology was now being shared with all Alliance members, revolutionizing space travel across the galaxy. We're also sharing medical technology and farming techniques, Helen added. Alliance worlds are healthier and more prosperous than they've ever been. But the most important speaker was Zaxel, the Kandorian rebel leader who had started the first uprising against Council rule. He now represented all the non-human species in the Alliance. My people want to thank humanity, Zaxel said, his blue skin glowing with emotion. You could have ruled us after defeating the Council. Instead, you gave us something more valuable, the chance to rule ourselves. Susan stood up to address the assembly. We didn't fight this war to become the new rulers of the galaxy. We fought because every living being deserves to be free. That includes the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them. The Assembly voted unanimously to approve the Galactic Charter of Rights, a document that guaranteed basic freedoms to all sentient beings. No species could be enslaved, no world could be forced to join any government, and every being had the right to speak their mind without fear. As the months passed, the Alliance faced new challenges. Some former Council worlds descended into civil war as different groups fought for power. Pirates attacked trade ships, knowing that Alliance forces were spread thin across hundreds of systems. A few species even tried to recreate the old Council system with themselves in charge, but for every problem, the Alliance found solutions. When the Centauri colonies started fighting each other, Alliance mediators helped them write a peace treaty. When pirates attacked vegan shipping, mixed-species patrol fleets drove them away. When the Altarian Empire tried to conquer their neighbors, Alliance forces stopped them without firing a shot. Captain Linda Hayes commanded one of these patrol fleets. Her stealth ship Phantom had been converted to a diplomatic vessel, carrying Alliance ambassadors to worlds that needed help. Linda's crew now included beings from 6 different species, all working together. Captain, we're approaching the Tau Ceti system, reported her navigator, a young Kandorian named Vexel. He was the son of the scientist General Clark had freed from the prison camps. What's the situation there? Linda asked. Local government collapsed, replied her communications officer, a vegan female named Solara. They're asking for Alliance help to restore order, Linda nodded. This was the new mission of Alliance forces, not to conquer or control, but to help and protect. It was harder than fighting wars, but more important, the final ceremony took place on New Terra. 1 year after the Battle of the Nexus, representatives from 300 worlds gathered to celebrate the first anniversary of the Alliance. The plaza was decorated with flags from every member species, and the air was filled with music from a dozen different cultures. Susan Walsh gave the closing speech as the 3 sons of New Terra sat behind her. She looked out at the crowd of beings who had once been enemies and saw something beautiful, a galaxy learning to live in peace. 1 year ago, humanity was exiled and alone, Susan said. Today, we are part of something greater than any one species could build alone. The Council tried to rule through fear and force. We choose to lead through example and cooperation. The crowd cheered, voices from across the galaxy joining in harmony. Children who had been born free played at their parents' feet while former slaves stood proudly as citizens of their own worlds. In the distance, ships from the Alliance fleet patrolled the star system. Human vessels flew alongside Kandorian fighters and vegan cruisers, their crews working together to protect the peace they had all fought to create. Jake Morrison watched from the crowd as Susan finished her speech. The former cargo captain thought about the choice he had made to rescue the Golden Wing, the decision that had started this whole chain of events. He had simply done what he thought was right, never imagining it would change the galaxy. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, families from different worlds walked home together. The Kandorian and human children had become best friends. Former Council soldiers worked alongside the rebels who had once fought them. Scientists shared knowledge that benefited everyone. The Council had exiled humanity thinking they were removing a problem. Instead, they had created the solution to their own tyranny. Humanity had learned something during their 3 centuries in the wilderness, that true strength came not from ruling others, but from helping others rule themselves. Now humanity did reign over the stars, but they shared that reign with everyone who believed in freedom. The galaxy had finally learned what it meant to be truly civilized, and it had taken the outcasts and exiles to teach them. The stars shone down on New Terra as the celebration continued into the night, a galaxy of free beings dancing under the light of hope.